they've turned soap into shivs and everyday items into zip guns. So let's take a roller coaster ride into this subversive realm where mundane objects go from zero to hero. Get ready to discover how inmates turn toothpaste into, well, something you wouldn't want to mess with. It's a peek into the ultimate making lemonade out of lemon story, right in the hidden corridors of incarceration. I reckon most folks wouldn't fancy finding themselves in the slammer, and it's not just because it's where society's wildest characters hang out. Some of these folks even manage to sneak in some contraband weapons. Yeah, weapons are a big no-no behind bars, but inmates are there precisely because they've got a knack for bending the rules. Oh, and here's the kicker. Weapons in prison aren't always just for attacking. Sometimes all it takes is for your fellow inmate to know you've got some makeshift shiv hidden away to make them think twice before messing with you or crossing your path. Despite all the talk of discipline and order in the joint, inmates still manage to outsmart even the craftiest guards with their imaginative DIY weapons. Now, let's dive into the fun stuff. The first DIY weapon might not be as mind-blowing as the others you'll see, but what's truly astonishing is how much time folks can spend making it. We're talking about your run-of-the-mill prison shanks here. To whip up a shiv in the free world, your average Joe would take no more than 1 to 2 hours, assuming they've got the right gear and gumption. Picture this, a chunk of metal gets transformed, shaped, and then its edge sharpened with the precision of a master craftsman using a grinding wheel. Following that, a handle is meticulously carved out of wood, the blade snugly nestled into its wooden abode, and voila! You've got yourself a homemade knife. But now let's crank up the fun factor. Imagine you're stuck with zilch, nada, absolutely no materials to fashion a knife. Sure, some clever inmates might scrounge up a bit of metal, but what's the next step? Well, that's when the real adventure begins. Hundreds of hours of slow and careful work, all while keeping it hush-hush to avoid arousing suspicion from the eagle-eyed guards. Typically, these inventive DIYers fashion their makeshift sharpening stations by rubbing that metal against the concrete surface, and maybe even add a touch of flair with some stolen tiles. But what if there's no metal in sight? That's when it's time to turn to the treasure trove of prison plastics and wooden wonders. For instance, you could transform a humble toothbrush into a cunning stabbing tool, or, believe it or not, score yourself some razor blades, snap off the end of that toothbrush, and wield your trusty heated plastic handle. Insert the razor blade, seal up the plastic edges with your nimble fingers, and behold, you've got yourself a perfectly functional contraption for slicing sausage, or if you dare, something a tad more lively. Okay, so remember that fancy DIY weapon we talked about earlier? Well, homemade guns in prison take DIY to a whole new level. They're like the James Bond gadgets of the inmate world, commonly known as zip guns. These contraptions are so wild that even the Correctional Service of Canada felt the need to dedicate a whole chapter to them in their training manuals, and they sit the newbie guards down to drop some knowledge on these covert creations. Why are zip guns all the rage behind bars, you ask? Because they're the Houdinis of weaponry, small, sneaky, and surprisingly deadly. When inmates aren't busy plotting their great escapes with these gizmos, they keep them in bits and pieces, kind of like a secret puzzle. The best part? The individual parts look about as harmless as a teddy bear picnic, making them easy to stash away in cells without a fuss. But here's the kicker. Putting together a DIY pistol into a full-fledged weapon is quicker than whipping up a microwave dinner. Sometimes these things are no bigger than your trusty ballpoint pen, which means they can pull off disappearing acts even when fully assembled. Imagine this. The handle's shell moonlights as a nifty barrel where bullets zoom and go ta-ta-ta when triggered. Hidden in the base of the handle is a cartridge and a contraption that gives the primer a little wake-up tap. Picture this, a mini pistol discovered in a Canadian lockup cleverly disguised among tools for arts and craft, unleashing 22 caliber mayhem. And wait for it, another 22 caliber pistol unearthed from Folsom Prison, was crafted from a regular old construction stapler, originally designed for fixing staples into wood, not playing target practice with bullets. The next weapon in our arsenal is so elegant and straightforward that it's like the James Bond of DIY prison contraptions. Inmates have given it the dramatic moniker of the water bomb, which might conjure images of action movie explosions, but in reality, it's just a humble bag filled with good old H2O. But let's peel back the layers on this aquatic intrigue. Some ingenious prisoners take plastic bags and transform them into waterlogged juggernauts, making them as heavy as a truckload of bricks. Imagine this, a regular run-of-the-mill grocery bag can chug down anywhere from 10 to 20 liters of water, turning it into a waterlogged behemoth weighing in at a whopping 10 to 20 kilograms. Now, for context, think about the heftiest bowling ball you've ever seen, tipping the scales at a modest 6.5 kilograms. But here's where it gets even wilder. Many prisons are like multi-story mazes with layers of cells connected by elevated walkways that weave through the concrete jungle. It's precisely in these towering fortresses of incarceration that inmates unleash their watery artillery on unsuspecting targets below. Imagine hurling a 20-liter water bag weighing as much as 3 bowling balls from the 5th floor. It hits its mark with the fury of a race car at 120 km per hour. And believe it or not, this cinematic scenario became real in October 2011 when one inmate found himself on the receiving end of such a water bomb spectacle. Luckily, the guy survived, but you can bet it made quite a splash in prison lore. Hold on to your breadcrumbs because the next weapon will blow your mind. It's none other than a full-fledged bread grenade. Picture this, 2 lemon-shaped grenades made from bread dough cooked up by none other than Yuri Perepelkin, a seasoned troublemaker and card-carrying member of the Crosses gang in St. Petersburg. But here's where it gets wild. One of these doughy grenades was packed with a punch, a whopping 40 grams of TNT, while the other served as a sneaky stand-in. And just to add that artistic touch, he painted them in a vibrant shade of green. Yep, you heard me right. By the way, in the creative world of prison, they can whip up all sorts of goodies from bread dough. All it takes is a dash of water and suddenly bread can be molded into pretty much anything you fancy. Once it dries up, you've got yourself a solid and sturdy masterpiece. Imagine inmates fashioning bread into makeshift blades or even crafting chess pieces for some epic prison chess battles. Checkmate! Now, fast forward to the wacky world of February 92, where Perepelkin and his motley crew of 6 inmates, armed with their bread grenades, decided to play a real-life action movie. They swooped in, taking 2 poor souls from the isolation unit hostage, and then locked themselves away in a cell-block fortress. Their demands? A helicopter, an arsenal of weapons, and a stash of narcotics, of course. Otherwise, they threatened to turn their captives into unwilling co-stars in their rogue drama. After some epic negotiating sessions that could rival Hollywood scripts, a squad of special forces descended upon the scene. And wouldn't you know it, during the high-octane showdown, Perepelkin never quite managed to hit the activate button on his bread grenade. Hold on to your bunk beds, folks, because the 5th slot, we've got the bed-made shotgun. Yep, you heard me right. This prison masterpiece was the brainchild of 2 crafty inmates from Celle prison in Germany, and it's as bonkers as it sounds. Picture this, they turned a bed into a weapon of mass, minor disruption. The shotgun's barrel? It's none other than the iron frame of the bed itself. And as for the handle, they MacGyvered it from bits of lead or lovingly held together with trusty tape. But here's where it gets interesting. Forget gunpowder, they went all DIY with match heads. And to light these fiery bad boys up, they used a filament from a busted light bulb and your run-of-the-mill batteries. Now that's some next-level engineering. So these 2 inmates who clearly had too much free time on their hands put their creation to good use. On that fateful day of May 21st, 1984, they decided to put their bed-made bang stick to the test by taking a prison guard hostage. You can guess what happened next. Nobody in their right mind believed that inmates could whip up a functioning firearm out of a bed. To prove they meant business, they blasted shots at a bulletproof glass, leaving it looking like Swiss cheese. Yep, their inventive skills weren't just for the show. The plot twist? Their craftiness actually paid off big time because they pulled off a Hollywood-style prison break, hightailing it out of there in a getaway car. As for the daring duo's fate after their great escape, well, that's a mystery that's still floating in the airwaves.